They lived boldly, loved unapologetically, and changed the world in ways that still echo today. These Black LGBTQ+ pioneers broke barriers in music, literature, activism, and art, often in the face of silence, stigma, and danger. Many died too soon, but their stories didn't end there. Their legacies continue to inspire new generations to live their truth, speak out, and shine. This is a tribute to 15 lives that still matter, because they made sure we were seen. He wasn't just the queen of disco, he was its heartbeat, its glitter, its fire. Sylvester brought unapologetic queer visibility to the mainstream at a time when it was revolutionary just to exist. His piercing falsetto and flamboyant presence broke barriers, challenging the rigid norms of masculinity and race in the music industry. With the release of You Make Me Feel, Mighty Real, Sylvester gave the LGBTQ+ community something more than just a disco anthem. He gave them a spiritual awakening, a reason to dance with their heads high, and a reason to feel alive in their truth. But behind the sequins and strobe lights was a man who fought daily for dignity, equality, and love. He was out when it wasn't safe, proud when it wasn't popular, and radiant even in the darkest of times. Cause of death: AIDS. His voice still echoes through pride parades and underground clubs alike, turning every dance floor into a temple of queer joy. Marlon Riggs was a visionary, a poet with a lens, a warrior with a camera. His films didn't just document reality, they shattered silence. Through groundbreaking works like Tongues Untied, Riggs dared to tell the world what it meant to be black, gay, and unafraid in a country that often erased all three. He weaved vulnerability and resistance into every frame, reclaiming stories that had been buried under centuries of shame. His art was not for comfort, it was for truth, for justice, and for those who had been told they were invisible. Riggs faced not only the stigma of being HIV positive, but the compounded oppression of racism and homophobia. Still, he refused to whisper. Cause of death: AIDS. He didn't just make films, he created mirrors, reflecting the beauty and pain of those who rarely saw themselves on screen. Octavia Street Laurent was elegance personified, a dreamer with undeniable star power. Immortalized in the groundbreaking documentary Paris is Burning, she embodied grace, wit, and a burning desire to be seen, not just as a trans woman, but as a supermodel, an icon, a human being worthy of love and dignity. Octavia's life was a daily dance with adversity. She lived with HIV, endured poverty, and faced constant discrimination, but never stopped believing in herself. She radiated confidence, beauty, and self-love in a world that offered her little of any. Her presence lit up every ballroom, and her words continue to inspire generations of trans women and queer youth who dare to dream bigger. Cause of death: cancer. She lit up every space she entered and never apologized for shining, because she knew her light came from within. Kevin Aviance wasn't just a performer. He was an experience, a staple of New York's drag and ballroom scene. Kevin blended fashion, theater, and music into a singular persona that lit up the queer nightlife of the 1990s and 2000s. His 2006 survival of a brutal anti-gay hate crime made headlines. But what defined Kevin was not the attack, but his resilience. He came back fiercer, louder, and more dazzling than ever, becoming a beacon of strength for a generation of queer youth who learned from him how to turn pain into power. On stage, he was magic. Off stage, he was a mentor, a friend, and a fighter. His music, fashion, and fierce energy helped shape the aesthetics of an entire era in LGBTQ+ nightlife. Cause of death: reported heart complications, unconfirmed. Kevin didn't just perform, he embodied survival, glamour, and unapologetic queer truth. Octavia Butler didn't just write science fiction, she reshaped it. As a black woman in a genre long dominated by white men, she carved out space where none had existed. Through novels like Kindred, Parable of the Sour, and Fledgling, she explored race, gender, identity, and the human condition with unmatched insight and imagination. Though she never explicitly labeled her sexuality, many of her stories challenge heteronormative conventions and explore queer futures. In Butler's worlds, difference was not a defect, it was evolution. She envisioned societies built on empathy, adaptation, and survival, and in doing so, she gave voice to the marginalized of every kind. Cause of death: stroke. She dreamed of futures where no one had to hide, and she wrote them into being, page by powerful page. Frankie Knuckles was more than a DJ. He was the heartbeat of a revolution. Known as the godfather of house music, Frankie took the rhythms of disco, the pain of rejection, and the ecstasy of release, and turned them into something transcendental. In the clubs of Chicago and beyond, he gave queer people of color a sanctuary, a place to be free, to feel joy, to belong. His music was medicine. His mixes told stories of heartbreak, hope, and resilience. And when the AIDS crisis ravaged the communities he played for, Frankie kept spinning. He turned grief into groove, struggle into sound, and silence into a symphony of life. Cause of death? Complications from diabetes. He didn't just make people dance. He gave them a reason to keep living, one beat at a time. If pain could speak, it would sound like the poetry of Essex Hempill. Bold, erotic, raw, and prophetic. His verses tore through the silence of America's denial of black gay existence. In poems like American Wedding and Vital Signs, he chronicled not only his own experiences, but those of an entire community struggling to be seen. He wrote about love that dared, bodies that danced and died, and voices that refused to be silenced. His activism was literary, his weapon was language, and his battlefield was the page. Essex was not just a poet, he was a lifeline, articulating truths many feared to utter. Cause of death: AIDS-related complications. Through his words, Essex lives on, not just as a poet, but as a revolutionary whose pen fought like fire. Elin Harris broke barriers with his pen and touched hearts with his courage. As one of the first black gay authors to find commercial success, Harris changed the landscape of American literature forever. His debut novel, Invisible Life, peeled back the layers of identity, secrecy, and longing, offering readers, especially queer black men, a reflection they had never seen before in mainstream fiction. He didn't write to shock, he wrote to heal. His characters were full of love, conflict, and complexity, just like the real people who devoured his books in private and in public. Harris gave countless readers the courage to speak their truth, love, openly, and finally feel seen. Cause of death: heart attack. He didn't just tell stories, he created a world where truth and tenderness could coexist. Alvin Ailey was a dance pioneer who used movement to tell the story of an entire people. As the founder of the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, he brought the Black American experience to global stages with pieces like Revelations, which transformed spirituals and sorrow into soaring choreography. His art was both intimate and universal, rooted in history, aching with truth, and bursting with life. He took personal pain, societal struggle, and generational trauma, and turned them into performances that left audiences breathless. Ailey was also a deeply private man, and though his sexuality and battle with AIDS were not widely discussed during his lifetime, his legacy speaks volumes about the intersections of race, art, and queerness. Cause of death: AIDS-related complications, kept private at the time. He danced not just with his body, but with his soul, and the world still moves to his rhythm. Donny Hathaway's voice was velvet and ache, prayer and confession. A genius of soul and gospel music, he gave us hauntingly beautiful songs like A Song for You, Someday We'll All Be Free, and This Christmas, classics that still stir the soul decades later. Behind the music, however, was a man struggling with severe mental illness and the isolating pressures of fame. Though Hathaway never publicly came out, many within the community believe his lyrics, tenderness, and sensitivity hinted at deeper truths about his identity and pain. His death at age 33, under tragic and mysterious circumstances, left the world grieving what could have been. But the power of his music remains, timeless, healing, and full of quiet resistance. Cause of death: suspected suicide. His music still cradles the hearts of the broken and the brave, giving voice to feelings too heavy to name. Willy Ninja was a force of nature. Known as the godfather of voguing, he brought the underground ballroom culture of New York into the global spotlight. With sharp precision, grace, and charisma, he showed the world that dance could be more than movement. It could be identity, resistance, and art, all at once. Willy trained dancers, walked balls, and influenced fashion designers and pop stars alike. He made gender fluidity elegant, made expression limitless, and gave queer Black and Latinx kids a blueprint for how to be both fierce and fearless. His legacy lives on in every pose struck on stage and every runway walk filled with attitude. Cause of death: heart failure related to HIV. He didn't just teach the world how to vogue, he taught them how to own every part of who they are. Burke was a trailblazer in more ways than one. As the first Major League Baseball player to come out as gay, his story is one of both quiet bravery and public resistance. A talented outfielder for the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Oakland A's, Glenn faced homophobia, not just from fans, but from within his own team and management. His teammates knew. The locker room knew. Baseball knew. But the world wasn't ready for someone like him. Black, gay, unapologetic, and fiercely athletic. After retiring early, Glenn endured homelessness and addiction, yet he never stopped being proud of who he was. And yes, he's widely credited with inventing the high five, an everyday symbol of celebration created by a man who rarely received his own. Cause of death: AIDS. He broke barriers in sports long before the world was ready, and his courage still echoes through every stadium. While he never graced magazine covers or headlined films, Gerald Lee Blassingame's impact was immeasurable. As a theater artist and grassroots activist, he brought education, compassion, and honesty to communities that needed it most, particularly Black youth in the American South. Gerald used storytelling and performance to talk about HIV prevention, self-love, and queer identity. He didn't need a spotlight to shine. He created light in classrooms, workshops, and small-town community centers, anywhere young people needed hope. In a time and region where stigma still ran deep, Gerald was a gentle rebel. His legacy lives on in the lives he touched, the minds he opened, and the futures he made safer. Cause of death: health complications related to HIV. Though his name isn't in history books, his legacy lives in hearts, in change, and in truth. Joseph Beam was more than a writer. He was a visionary who believed that Black gay men deserved to see their stories on the page. As the editor of In the Life, the first anthology of writing by Black gay men in the United States, he created a sacred space for voices that had been ignored, dismissed, and erased. Beam knew that literature could be a lifeline. Through essays, poetry, and activism, he fought for dignity in a world that often offered none. His words called for love, community, and understanding, and they came not from theory, but from lived experience. He died too young, but his work sparked a literary movement that still burns bright. Cause of death: AIDS. He believed in the power of the pen and wielded it like a torch in the darkness, lighting the way for others. Known to many as Tonex during his early career in gospel music, Slade was a powerhouse of talent, vocally gifted, theatrically bold, and spiritually complex. After coming out as gay, he was rejected by many in the conservative gospel world, but embraced by a new generation of fans who finally saw themselves reflected in his work. He dared to tell the truth in an industry that often demanded silence. With electrifying performances that blended soul, funk, gospel, and experimental music, Slade redefined what it meant to be a queer artist of faith. His work was raw and radiant, fueled by both divine inspiration and human struggle. Cause of death: reported suicide. Unconfirmed. His voice was divine, but it was his unflinching truth that made him unforgettable.